Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the webinar Future LCA Tools for LCA Experts and Consultants, where we will be hearing about how LCA tools are evolving and will evolve, and how dynamic LCA tools will change the context and change how LCA processes happen, and how the new data can be used. Before we start, we have a survey that we will be sending to all of you. So check the link out. You'll be seeing it. You'll be getting it on your email, and you'll also be seeing it in different places from this event, in which we want to hear from you what your view is on this, and we'll be sharing those results with you. So today we will have three panelists. We will have Markus Berger, professor at the University of Twente in the Netherlands, and he's teaching LCA, and he will be giving us insights on that part, on that angle. So how do LCA tools look like from the point of view of teaching LCA and bringing people into LCA? Then I will be presenting my point of view from the point of view of developing LCA tools and the vision on where we think LCA tools are going in Earthster. And we will also have Antti Kosunen, CEO at Earthster, and he will be giving us a complementary point of view on those tools and how we are changing to that context. So without further ado, I want to welcome on the stage Markus Berger, and over to you with your presentation. Thank you, Markus.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Daniel, and thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity here to talk. I think in a webinar on the future of LCA, education shouldn't be missing, because this is what is basically creating the future, or at least the future LCA practitioners, scientists, and all these different domains. So I would like to start this little overview here with a statement on the increasing relevance of LCA in very different compartments and in very different domains. So the first one here is policy. I'm sure you all have heard about the product environmental footprint and organizational environmental footprint that is currently coming up at the EU level, and that is more and more feeding also into very concrete regulations. So if we think about the eco-design directive or the battery directive, renewable energy directive, all of these are binding pieces of legislation where LCA is an essential part of it. So which basically means you either have to be able to do an LCA of your product in order to comply with this legislation, or you need to fulfill criteria which have been derived based on LCA. So that is, of course, a big driver for the relevance of LCA. Very broadly speaking, the second one is industry. So industry has a big interest and increased interest in LCA, of course, first of all, with regard to compliance to these regulations, but it is also more and more doing LCAs of its products. And some years ago, you were still a little bit of an alien in the company if you were the LCA guy. That has changed drastically. And also, it's more and more going from doing LCAs of existing products towards LCAs in the product development, so that in a very early stage, you already do your LCAs to see where are environmental hotspots along the life cycle of your product, because at that early stage, you still have the opportunity to change everything, to use different materials, different processes, etc. And that can, of course, be of big benefit for industry as well. And also talking about industry, it's about communication. So things like product category rules, environmental product declaration, for all of that, LCA is required. And that also links to the third pillar here of the increasing relevance of LCA, and these are the consumers, your customers and companies, because there is an increasing awareness going on. More and more people are really curious on the carbon footprint, on all of these measures of their products, which are partly also labeled on products. So that all increases the rise of relevance for LCA. And this has led then also to an increased demand for life cycle assessment expertise. So just yesterday, I was looking at Indeed, as we are running this on LinkedIn, and maybe I should have used another platform. But in that, I found more than 200 current open LCA positions. And I don't want to advertise them here, but it's just to show you, just as maybe as a broad range here. We have the consultancies who are announcing, we have electronics, we have companies like Unilever, also from the automotive industry. There is more and more demand for LCA. And from what I hear from colleagues is, they really have also a hard time filling these positions, because it's more and more relevant. And that also then creates some demand at the university side, because in the end, it's also a bit our job to provide those experts for the future. And there we see at different universities, LCA is embedded structure-wise and also in different study programs at very different positions. So a classical one would be the environmental engineering, where LCA departments and LCA lectures are embedded. Here in Twente, we are at the civil engineering department, which might be a little bit an outsider role, but also in the mechanical engineering, you see that at other universities, or chemical engineering. So you really see that in all kind of engineering faculties and study programs that LCA is creating in there. And with regard to content, what I see here in our university, but also with many colleagues, is of course a priority is teaching the methodology of ISO-based LCA, of the product environmental footprint, so that students get aware of that. And then it's mainly about their application side. So how is LCA actually used in legislation, in application, also in communication, and especially for the design-oriented studies like in the civil engineering or the mechanical engineering, it's then also in the product development. So how can this really be integrated technically, but also management-wise, that you really integrate LCA into decision-making processes. And then if it comes to the different LCA tools that we use in software, then I would say until recently, it's been the two big players, which we have all used, like CIMAPro and Gabi, which are quite well-known LCA softwares. But also more recently, we had open source softwares like OpenLCA, or now also Earthster coming up, which is more frequently also used in education for different reasons, which I will come in a minute. But this is really essential, the practical application. So it's not only about giving LCA lectures and making people familiar with methodology, it's also really getting the hands on the tools and the software packages to really play with it, to really get an overview, okay, what is it able to do? And just as one impression, I'm just grading assignments currently. So we were for the first time here using Earthster. And that is how a typical seminar task looks like here at my university in Twente, but also at my old university in Berlin. And also I know from colleagues that they're doing similar assignments. In this case, it's been a bridge. So the students were asked to design a bridge out of different materials, concrete, steel, and timber. And then they come up with nice design structures, and then they have to do all the nasty structural mechanics and calculate how thick should the beams be that the bridge doesn't break, etc. So that is the classical engineering thing. But then also they can instantly model the life cycle assessment. In this case, it was carbon footprint, the water footprint, and the resource use, which they have been analyzing, and also the life cycle costing, to say that. And they can instantly see, okay, what consequences do design decisions have on their environmental performance. So what happens if I use a different steel grade for these beams, or what happens if I make the handrails not out of steel but out of timber, etc. You instantly see the bubbles changing, and that is very nice for students to see really this link between design and environmental impact. And yeah, the first experience we got here is really what students like. This is this low entry barrier. So you don't have to install something, you don't have to pay excess fees, etc. Browser-based software that was really very useful. Also that it's intuitive to use, especially if you have, in this case, it's bachelor students. So it's very intuitive for search, etc. And also a big question, what we very often have with working with students is, how can we share data? How can we share our models? How can we bring it all together if everybody was working similarly? How can we do the comparisons of the different alternatives that different groups have done? And that is, I would say, one of the strengths here, which we see, that people can share data, intuitive to use, and especially this fast response. And that is also something which is a demand, which I observe not only from the students, but also from clients, that you are able to answer these kind of questions, these what-if questions, these scenarios, to have that very, very soon available. Yeah, and that's something which I just wanted to share with you on how LCA is handled in education and at universities, and what are our demands and how we are trying to satisfy the needs of different stakeholders in terms of future LCA experts. Thanks.
Thank you, Markus, for that insight. And I've already penciled in some questions for later for the Q&A.
Yeah.
So, but before we go through it, let's go through the whole set of presentations, and then we will have the panel, including as well Antti. So if we can get my presentation up while it goes up, this is a reminder that if you're watching it, if you're watching this, you are probably a very interesting person for us to hear from you in regards to the future of LCA. So you have a link to the questionnaire, to the survey that we're running, and we will share the results of that survey, of those insights from different people participating in this webinar on what does the future of LCA hold, what needs do we have from our LCA software, from LCA tools, and from those now and from those in the future. But let me outline a little bit what is our vision here in Earthster? What do we think LCA will look like in the future? And I'm going to tackle this from different angles. But I'll start first with a big statement, right? Where will LCA be? And I personally believe that LCA will be everywhere, not necessarily in the shape that it is now, but it will be everywhere in the sense that it will be used in decisions in many, many different places, like it needs to be. Because it is to date the best way for us to measure environmental impact. So whenever we're accounting for sustainability, and that's present in more and more decisions, LCA needs to be at the backbone of all the decisions that we have. But then that means that if we transcend those silos, those alien silos, borrowing Markus's words, so that it's not only for the alien inside the company, but it goes for everybody. We probably need to work as a community in making sure that it's understandable, and we sure have put effort. It's not the last effort, meaning that we need to work together with many people to make sure that we all understand, we all speak the same language. And finally, the maybe a bit more abstract one is that it needs to be adaptable. It needs to adapt to the circumstances that it lands in, because each company is different, each decision is different. So it needs to respond to questions. It can't just be a report. Of course, there can be a report because reports often answer questions, but we need to make sure that the last part is the most important one. And that's at the essence of what I want to present here. So I'm going to outline 3 big trends and how I think they will affect LCA. And on this first one, I'll dig a little bit deeper because I want to show some things in Earthster, like what we're doing and how we see the world. And the first one is big data. Like we live in everybody's talking about data and how we can use data to do more things. It can be from more predictable things like analyzing that data and doing analytics and so on, to predictions, to maybe even artificial intelligence. But the reality is that for all those things to be possible, what we need is as well big data. And big data means that we need to have big amounts of data that is connected in a way or another, that you can analyze together, that you work on it together. And one thing, I'm going to switch to Earthster for a moment. One thing that we realized quite early on is that the way to grow dramatically the usefulness of LCA is to work on the connections between things instead of treating data as buckets or silos, and that means that we took a almost radical approach in that sense, that we believe in browser-based, but not only in browser-based, but in single points of reference. And this is maybe a little bit more specific, so that when you're modeling a product, there should be one place where that data lives, and then there should be a way of when that data updates, then those updates being captured, being propagated, right? So the data structure that we use, instead of people having their individual machines and their individual servers, what we do is this is a cycle. it represents a life cycle of a product. And then if I go all over to the edge, everything that I'm seeing here is in my model. But when I get here to the edge, printing wiring board, this is an echo-invent process in this particular example. But it's not a copy of an echo-invent process. It's not a version of an echo-invent process. It's a link to a version of the echo-invent process. There is one single point of reference, which means that when there's a new version, you just have to update to the new version. You just have to say, okay, so this one's pointing at an old version, point it to the new version. Now, if it's only from the echo-invent point of view, then you could say, well, okay, that's just glorified updates. But we took that one step further. Whenever you're consuming your own data, it's a pointer to another cycle. It's a pointer to somebody, to some other data. When you get data from your suppliers, it's also a pointer. It's also a link to that data. That means that, for example, if you ask for information for your suppliers, you don't want your supplier to send you an Excel filled with all the inputs that you've guessed were relevant in their case, and then you build a model. Because when that happens, and I'm aware because I've done LCAs for quite a long time, I'm aware that that's very common. We ask for the information to be able to build our models. But if we, instead of that, connect to an LCA somewhere else, then that information is double as valuable, because as the other person consumes that information, they are understanding their environmental impact. But also as they update it, because things improve and things change, I am getting a better model. And then overall, the whole structure of LCAs is getting better. Now, of course, this is one of those exponential effects. So if I invite my suppliers, for every supplier I get, my information doesn't get linearly better, it gets quadratically better. But at the same time, already by connecting one, I'm harnessing that first bit of value. Now that adds all sorts of other challenges, meaning that you need to have visibility on the data. You need to understand well the data, or you need to give a framework for the other one to answer. But you are creating a series of connected data that we can all learn from. So that suppliers can learn from, we can learn from, depending on the level of sharing. Then everybody's improving and making that supply chain better. And in the case of echo-invent, for example, we are always connected to the latest version. If anybody has here faced an update to a new version of echo-invent, it's not a trivial task. But through this, it becomes for the user information a relatively trivial task. It is data connectivity. And when it comes to data connectivity, if you look at our updated pricing, that Antti will mention a bit more about, so I won't steal the thunder. But we offer to our customers to import data from other formats, and it's because we believe that you may have a wealth of data, maybe disconnected data, but a wealth of data that you've already modeled. So in that sense, all data should be possible to connect all data, including data that you've modeled in CIMAPRO and Gabi. They've been around for a long time. We've all done great models in them. And then if I had to start over, then we would have two disconnected silos. And we are very much in favor of avoiding those silos. And finally, we're also API ready, because we believe that all these things, we're in the browser, so you could always have anticipated that, but we believe that many of these things should be possible to automate. And we can't envision all the possibilities of automation, right? So there's many things that you may say, oh, well, in my case, I want to update this cycle with this when this happens. So in that sense, we put more effort in opening the API. So if you give an API, if you gain API access, you can update different things. And finally, the last thing I want to share, the last angle, is data accessibility. Who gets access to what? And I wanted to show here the access panel, because like Markus mentioned, we focus on making our tool very intuitive. But intuitive is useful when you can actually share with a specific customer and say, look, these are our environmental impacts. So you can go here to your cycles sharing settings and share specific cycles with different access levels. So you can share very specifically, or you can share less specifically, so that they can see different parts of your model and they can understand and they can use it in their own LCA. Again, the vision of connected LCA. And now, if we come back to the presentation, then the next frontiers when it comes to this. So one of the reasons why we think big data is the future is because through that we can then automate the way we collaborate. We can enhance the human activities by suggesting the most suitable processes for a particular case, or by streamlining review, by pointing out you should look at these things, etc. And finally, that is the step for us to be able to use artificial intelligence at its full potential when it comes to lifecycle assessment. We can use it in bits and pieces, and we're actually testing different bits and pieces of using artificial intelligence in specific tasks. But we believe that there is a point in which complex models require thinking and understanding, but there's a lot of parts of those models that can be artificially developed and then supervised by humans. So one last thing before I invite everybody and we start with the discussion is a last reminder that I given already about the survey that you've received, that we would very much like to hear from you, because I'm here presenting some ideas and now we will be debating different points of view, but we want to hear from you as well, because we believe the openness comes also by collaboration, and we want to work with others. We push new features on a weekly basis, which means that we're keen on hearing what people need, what people use, what people will do, so that we can work together with the community to build the future LCA tool. And that's all from my side. I would like to invite back to stage both Markus and Antti, and we can take it on the Q&A. Welcome. So let me throw a first question at Antti, who's fresh here. Antti's a CEO at Earthster, and well, you can give an introduction of yourself as well. But the question I have for you is, what do you think is the future and the present of the LCA tools market?
Well, first, I think you already gave the introduction of me. So I'm one of the co-founders at the Earthster, trying to save the globe. And listening to Markus' presentation also is that we do have hope. And one of the reasons why we have hope is that the big vision, what we have, is that every business decision will take environmental impacts into account. And I'm seeing that happening already. We are still not there, but companies are making decisions, and there are different roles, different kind of use cases with LCA. So there are the business decision makers, and then there are the LCA experts. Having LCA experts first doing the LCA, providing the data for the business decision makers who can do the scenarios, who can do what ifs. What if I have 10% less aluminium on the product? What if I buy this from Germany instead of UK? And doing scenarios and finding the ways how we can save the globe. And also the depth of usage of the LCA data is very good. We've done projects on strategy level. Like, should we enter that market or that market, and what kind of impacts are there with the concept that this particular company has on each of those markets or industries, and then product development. You have to have product-specific environmental data in order to do greener products, and that's the funny thing when we talk about carbon accounting still, that product data is required for designing greener products, stating the obvious. And then also the green narrative is very important, and it has to be factual. It has to be based on data. not greenwashing, but finding the real data, finding the ones that you can tell it to your customers. And when you tell it to them, the likelihood of them purchasing your product is higher. And of course, when you have the data, you end up using it in your own processes and developing greener products, greener businesses. So I see hope.
Excellent. Thank you, Antti. I'll start by throwing in a question, and I'm going to pick it up from Markus' presentation. You mentioned PEF or PEF-OF as part of the context, and we know, or at least I believe I know, it will affect uptake of LCA and to some extent structure. But how do you think, Markus, it will affect the tools performing those LCAs?
Well, PEF and LCA are very similar, but there are some details if you take a deep dive. And one of them is also regarding data prescription, so that you have certain data requirements, etc., that you have certain fixed methodological rules. You don't have that much freedom as you have in LCA. And I could imagine that this is also then maybe not so much reflected in the LCA tools, but in the databases that are used for that. And PEF is currently developing their own databases. With regard to the tools, of course, the tools need to be able to evaluate the 14 PEF impact categories. So that is something which they have to do. I could imagine also in the reporting, when it comes to things like normalization, weighting in the end, then of course all the PEF methods simply need to be implemented in whatever tool. One's on the database level, because you have to fulfill the requirements, but also on the evaluation level, if you want to communicate the results, they need to be in line with PEF.
I think that it's a shifting the importance of different features, in the sense that if you look at LCA tools, like how they have been, one thing that stands out is flexibility. You've got everything in front, so to say, because people may do very different things. And PEF is so to say, creating a bit stricter rules in some areas. So some of the moving parts maybe are less important once PEF arrives. Would you agree with that?
That is for sure the intention of the product and environmental footprint. To that I agree, and I also fully understand where that is coming from. But on the other hand, there's also a reason why LCA is as flexible as it is, because it needs to work for a shirt, for a laptop, and for furniture. And those products can be completely different, with completely different cutoff system boundary allocation challenges. And having the one-size-fits-all solution, of course, then also creates some imbalance in terms of it might be a best case scenario for one product group, but a worst case for another product group. And that's why we are also in PEF turning to this PEF category rules, these PEF CRs, etc., where we're trying to even then fix that further. But the intention is there for sure.
It is certainly a challenge to define well a product category role.
Yeah.
You mentioned also the constraints on the data, and I would like to expand that part because we've talked about the future LCA tools, but often when we think of tools, we combine that thought with the data that they include, even to the point that some people say, "Oh, I picked that tool because I like the data more." So how do you think that the data will evolve? And this question is for both of you, by the way. Where do you think that the data will evolve? And I'm thinking databases like Equipment, I'm thinking new databases like PEFZone. Where are we headed towards in the data space? Now let's take our crystal balls out.
I would say that quite soon we have enough data for AI, and that will be enhancing the data, and we'll end up having much better data. I used to say that Earthster has the equally good data as the best ones on the market. Nowadays, I say that we have the equally bad data as the best ones on the market. So coming from financial industry, it's impossible to base your decisions on data that is as accurate as environmental data at this stage. So we need to do a lot of things in order to have the really accurate data. And then one word there that I want to stress is the connected data. And funny enough, people combine or misunderstood the word connected with collected. So if you just collect data from your suppliers, then you end up having something that is, again, it will be old data soon. But when it's connected, always up-to-date data, that's when somebody changes their process in the supply chain, it automatically brings the newest data to all of us. So I believe that the data will be connected, or the data that we will be using, it will be enhanced by AI, and there will be plenty of data, and it will be not only connected like the Earthster is doing them at the moment, but also connecting with all the sources. We've started that process. We are already connecting with ERP systems and the likes, but more connected, and then the quality increases dramatically. And again, then it is easier to base your decisions also based on environmental data.
Yeah, I would certainly agree that the data gets broader. The data landscape gets certainly broader. So until some years, you had Gabi and EcoInvent, and that's it. Yeah, that was quite easy. Now it's getting more diverse. Yeah, so we have this product-specific databases. I don't know, Agribaloise, etc., for agricultural products, etc., or national databases, IO databases, or even databases based on product category rules. So that is increasing. On top of that, we have more and more the extent, which you also just mentioned, of basically getting data from suppliers directly, or maybe even via the software directly, or using artificial intelligence. Real-time data is always an issue in LCA. And all of that is, on the one hand, great. On the other hand, I'm not sure if the data is really getting better by that, because LCA is a little bit more than having some fancy tools and some fancy databases. You also need to make sure that the quality is correct. So are cutoffs correctly applied? Are things like data quality requirements really inhabited? Is it really related to the functional unit? All of those, how is allocation done? If you're sending out data format, or if an artificial intelligence just selects data from some supplier, does it really know how is it intelligent enough to know that the allocation needs to be done in the correct way, etc.? So that's one thing which is still to be seen, whether the increase in diversity also means an increase in quality. That will be interesting to observe.
I think we have a need for both. So I think there, and the problem is that with an increase in quantity comes an increase in quality in the better ones, and then a need to select the better ones, because it comes with a decrease in quality with the long tail of other data. So you're right that there's a risk. I was recently in a meeting, and I said that there's a problem of there's becoming a CAD problem, computer-aided disaster, meaning that you automate a process without understanding the core parameters, like, for example, without understanding data consistency, like making sure that the models are coherent with each other. And then you end up with a number that looks very reliable, but is not necessarily a number. So all these steps clearly need to be done carefully, and there will be noise, but there will also be a lot of new signal that we haven't seen so far because of the automation, because you can do things a bit more automated, like real time. If the model is correct and you have it updated real time, that is better data, no question.
And also thinking about how companies develop the skills or understanding of environmental data, I would kind of forbid the AI today and allow them to get the AI only in the use of environmental data after the first learning phase. Winston Churchill has said that plans are nothing and planning is everything. And I guess it goes the same way with LCA. So LCAs are nothing, but LCAing is everything, if that's a word. So we need to understand the data without understanding is nothing, and the organizations and professionals need to be educated on the whole process of all the components of the LCA, and only then we can use it more efficiently, and then the AI will make our life better.
We've touched on a topic related to the role of, and I'm going to dare say, LCA practitioners, but maybe they won't be called like that. And maybe it's not one type of individuals. But how do you think LCA skills will evolve in the future? This touches very closely Markus's presentation. How will people interact with LCA, and will we need more LCA practitioners, different LCA practitioners?
I would say we need more people who understand what is behind those numbers and how they are influenced, how they are created, what they are sensitive to, etc. And that's why I also, in teaching, I really like to do these case studies and these seminars where people really have to get their hands on and suddenly see, wow, if I use an economic allocation instead of a mass-based allocation, the result changes totally. If I use different end-of-life crediting methods, it can really go like this. So where are the parameters that influence this data? Because the data are just a number, and it's nice to present in these graphs, etc. But where do they come from? How do they change? That is still the human power in interpreting the numbers, which I think will be relevant in the long run. And there will be more and more people dealing with life cycle based data and in legislation, in industry, etc. And that's why I kind of have this ambitious goal here at the university that no one from our faculty should get a degree and leave here without at least having heard something about LCA, about some of these carbon footprints and what they are sensitive to. So it doesn't mean that the people are all at the software doing the LCAs, but at least have a feeling of what these numbers represent.
I think it's a form of literacy. Everybody should be able to read an LCA, not necessarily write them.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally agree. So nobody should graduate without some understanding of LCA.
Okay, I quote you on that. for the students.
And how I see is I'm comparing the LCA industry with accounting industry. So there are accounting software, and previously it was a manual process. Then it became some software, and now it's totally industry. And still we have those bookkeepers who are using the software, but then there are auditors, there are very large number of different kind of financial experts that are assisting companies, and that's what's going to happen with this industry also.
Yeah, even in totally unrelated department, not totally unrelated, but I see this more and more in companies in purchase departments, that they basically, purchasers, they have a lot of things and a lot of key performance indicators, and now they're getting more and more environmental ones. And then I sometimes see decisions like, okay, we purchase a material from this company because then we get a 3% lower carbon footprint. Well, in order to be able to say the carbon footprint is 3% lower and that is really better, you need to be so sure that all the system boundary, all the goal and scope, all of these things are so similar. And that's why even people working in a purchase department and having to deal with these figures should have some basic understanding what it means to talk about 3%.
And now I'll double that on that. If it's 3% better, and if it's been allocated based on total company footprint divided economically, that says very little. The difference between products are typically much bigger than that 3%.
Yeah. No, but it's about for purchasing the same thing. So I could purchase aluminium from, 10 different suppliers, and then we use it based on the carbon footprint, but then you should also know what is underneath these numbers. And that is coming more and more, that this is really, which is good for us, that LCA is really becoming decision relevant, finally, after all those years doing all these studies. But that also means that more and more people are using it who don't have necessarily the gradual LCA background.
And probably I remember when teaching that there was I would draw it as a curve, that people come very excited and say, oh, we're going to get a number for environmental impact. Then they start learning about all the methodological decisions that they can make. that affect the number. So they suddenly get, a little bit disappointed that the number doesn't mean that much. And then when they start understanding those decisions, they actually start realizing that they gain more insight than just the number. So it is a little bit more complicated, but once you go through that bridge, then you actually understand the life cycle, understand how you can make things better.
Yeah.
And sometimes even not only environmentally. Like I know people who's done an LCA and then figured out how to make the product cheaper, for example. But that curve, I'm pretty sure happens also to people in industry without having a professor next to them guiding them by the hand.
I can completely confirm that. Yeah, usually after the third lecture, the students tell you, "Oh, all this LCA is just nonsense. Everything just depends on the assumptions. I cannot get a straight result." They have this frustration. But then it also says, okay, yeah, then you can go out of that valley again, because then you learn, okay, what are for this system the relevant numbers, and where can I have an influence, etc. Same with designers, that they suddenly learn, okay, it might not necessarily be my core domain, but in this and other things, there I can really influence the environmental performance. So that's an interesting learning, and it's not like this. Yeah, it's a curve indeed.
So for anybody listening to this video, if you're in that valley, it gets better.
Also, I'm also very, very much looking forward to what happens with collaborative LCA. So from a learning perspective, for example, at the moment we are collecting data from supply chains in food industry, textile industry, automotive, and what else? Packaging, yeah. And then when they are collecting the data or connecting the data, it doesn't matter what is the step or stage of the product that it starts from, but the whole supply chain or value chain will be collaborating, and that leads to discussions. And then the collaborative learning increases dramatically, and that's really what I'm looking forward. And of course, when I mentioned those industries, so if you are on packaging, food, textile, or automotive industry, and you want to join our creation of supply chain databases, please contact me. You'll find me on LinkedIn, so please contact me. More than happy to have a chat about that.
Excellent. Well, I think we've reached the end of our time, but I want to thank our speakers, Markus and Antti, and I'm not thanking myself, but and so this was the webinar Future LCA Tools for LCA Experts and Consultants, where we covered how dynamic LCA tools are changing the way we do LCAs and in which direction they're going, and where we believe they will be, we believe technology will take them. Now, for those of you who want more information or who want to join us for another webinar or learn more about Earthster, we will have another webinar in a week. So we will have a webinar on next Wednesday at the same time as this one, so at 3 p.m. CET. And with that, I would like to say thank you as well to the participants. So thank you all, and I wish you a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.